Hello and welcome to the Total Clarity Podcast. I'm Jessie Hyatt.
And I'm Mike Varley, and we are here in our final week of Staten Island.
Yeah, we walked the south shore of Staten Island this week, and we've been here for a full month.
That's right. It's gone by very quickly. We've had a fantastic time, and summer has eclipsed into fall. And you may notice that we have some colorful outfits on.
Yeah, if you're watching, you may notice. If you're listening, you may not notice.
You might notice in the sparkle in our voices.
Oh, yeah, so I'm wearing one of my fall outfits, which is this jumpsuit that's made by Ace and Jig. It's one of my favorite pieces of clothing that I have, and I saved it for our walks. This was not a new piece for this project like some of the clothes are. It's something that I saved from my wardrobe already, and actually the jacket I'm wearing is also something I saved. This is an Uzbeki embroidered jacket that I got from one of these sales where there's lots of different people that bring things like would you call it like a trunk show or a vintage sale? It's not a vintage piece, but it's one of these sales where people bring their wares and sell things.
Yeah, I mean, it's a beautiful jacket.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I won't go into as much detail, but I'm wearing all clothes that we purchased secondhand at the start of this project.
Yeah.
And we, last weekend, took a whole mess of photos for our fall outfits, and we're in the process of going through them now and getting our website up and going and maybe having an accompanying video with it. So hopefully by the time you're hearing this, all that will be up. If not, it's because we have a lot going on and you will be seeing it in the coming days.
Yeah,
But
it'll be up soon.
yeah, but I have a feeling it will be up by the time you see this. We'll see though. But yeah, we're very excited about this season's outfits. I think it may be of the four seasons the most playful, and you know, with the summer and the winter, we had to be a little more practical with consideration for the weather, and with this one, we were able to cover ourselves, and hopefully it will be warm enough.
Yeah, well, we have at least I know I have a few extra jackets, and we have scarves and hats that we put logos on, and
yeah.
So if it starts to get too cold near the end of the season, we can just add layers.
That's right. And here's one of our logos as well, not the traditional HV logo, but you can see there's Varlet on my jacket. We modified this jacket, which if I were able to turn around right now, you'd see it's a United Auto Workers jacket, part of our union theme.
Yeah,
So
we'll be talking about that union maybe in the coming weeks on the podcast.
Yeah.
But that's the union that we're representing this season, in order to have some conversation around labor and the importance of unions in general.
That's right. So, just a first taste with all of our clothing stuff. Expect us to talk about it more in the coming weeks. We're very excited about it, and yeah, we just wanted to start fashioning them for you during the podcast.
Yeah. Have you ever, so you had to wear a uniform in school, right?
Yes.
So I never had to wear a uniform. I've never chosen to wear a uniform until now.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I'm not sure how much of my excitement is coming from just that I really love the clothes that I picked out for fall, and how much of it is switching my uniform up. Like, I've really liked my summer clothes too, but I've never ever worn clothes repeatedly in that way.
Mm-hmm. Well, when we wore the uniform, it was the same outfit for the whole year.
Yeah.
And we didn't really get as many opportunities to change. In grade school, 1st through 8th, I think there was some slight shifts between 4th and 5th grade. Like you could wear a golf shirt instead of a button shirt and a tie.
When you got to 5th grade?
That's right.
When you were old enough to golf?
Yeah, I guess.
Okay.
But that was always a big one because, you were liberated from the tie.
Right.
Which was
wow. Yeah, that's actually wild to be wearing a tie up until 4th grade and then not have, like...
Yeah.
They
were
typically
clip-ons.
It would be the opposite.
They were plaid clip-on ties.
Okay.
Green, like a dark forest green, a white, and with like very thin gold stripes on it.
Okay.
Plaid pattern.
That
and
sounds
then
kind of cute.
it was whatever. I mean, I think everybody hated it while they were wearing it. It's kind of funny to think about now. And then in high school, the big distinction was blazers. Freshmen and sophomores wore like a maroon blazer.
Okay.
And juniors and seniors wore a blue blazer.
Oh, wow.
And then there were ties as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that there was a distinction between the freshman and sophomore ties and the junior and senior ties. There was definitely a distinction between the freshman and sophomore girls' skirts and the junior and senior girls' skirts.
Yeah.
So
was there a lot of, because again, I did not do a uniform ever in school, but I've heard, and like from watching movies and stuff, is there a lot of trying to change the uniform, like, the girls raising the hemline, or I guess even with your like pants raising the hem, or shorts raising the hemline if it's hot, or trying to remove your tie or unbutton your shirt, or like was there anything like that
I don't
remember?
have a strong recollection of guys trying to get around. I think, like top button unbuttoned. It's not supposed to be unbuttoned, so maybe that was the thing.
Right.
And then, you had to have your shirt tucked in, so having it tucked out was a problem. Girls, definitely the skirt was a thing, but that was like, that was just kind of a weird teenage sex claiming thing, I think, where it was like, I want to be more sexy, not like, it was certainly wasn't a comfort thing, it was more an appearance
even
thing.
Like just the aesthetics of like, I feel like when a skirt hits at a certain point, like it's usually supposed to be below the knee, right?
Or no, I don't think it was. I think it was just above the knee at the time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. But sometimes it just looks like, depending on your leg shape too, it's like maybe you want a shorter skirt or a longer skirt because it makes you look less frumpy.
Maybe.
Like
I mean,
just feeling
it definitely
like you look nice.
It definitely felt like signaling in high school,
right.
From what I recall.
I mean, that makes sense.
Which,
That's also what they show in the movies.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it was totally just life imitating art.
Yeah. What do you think the point? I mean, we have these uniforms that we've made for ourselves, and the reason for us is because clothing communicates something, and we are deciding what we want to communicate in what we're wearing. What do you think the point of the uniform for kids in school is?
I think it is in order, well, I mean, it depends who you're asking. What I think it functions as positively is a way to eliminate competition in class from the day-to-day, and to not, I mean, I'm sure that if the entire high school had to wear what they wanted to wear, it would be the people that were rich, the people that were poor, the people that were looking to look tough, the people that were looking to look sexy, and none of that existed.
Right.
It was at most just people complaining about wearing the uniform.
Right.
And that was kind of a minority of people that were super vocal about it, and then like maybe a larger ring of people that just did it because it was, like talking about the weather. And then there was, I would say the majority of people were just like, whatever, this is just what it is. So I think it democratizes things in a weird way. Or maybe democratizes isn't the right word, because I don't know. It certainly limits choice, but it makes competition disappear.
Right. Yeah, I can see it being both positive and negative. I guess just thinking about the way that we've chosen our clothes and the way that I chose my clothes in grade school, middle school, high school, all of that. And then certainly going into fashion school in college, like being able to dress myself in school led me to being in the arts and led me to being a creative person and feeling good about that and feeling like that was something that I had a skill at and pushing me into I don't know if I would have ended up going to fashion school if I had it to wear a uniform. Who knows?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't have access to that alternate timeline.
Right.
So I don't know. But it does feel, as someone that never had to wear the uniform and never experienced that myself, and I have no, like, it just sounds so oppressive.
Yeah. Yeah.
But maybe it allows, like, if this is how we're communicating with people that we don't communicate with our words, maybe if you aren't able to communicate with your clothes at all, it could give you more incentive to learn how to communicate with your voice or to communicate with your math skills or your science or whatever it is that you're learning in school or through sports or whatever, like other things that you have access to.
Yeah. I mean, I think this idea that somehow it reduces people to some sort of, non-personality blobs or like this kind of Pink Floyd marching through a drab hallway situation is just, it's not true. There's people that you'll still have personalities through any number of means.
Right.
So is it necessary? I guess not. I didn't, in retrospect, don't have any particular problem with it.
Yeah.
But I'm sure I was among the people that were, complaining about it because it was fashionable to complain about.
Right.
Yeah. But this week, which was our first week wearing our fall outfits, we already had somebody immediately communicate with us as a consequence of wearing them, which was part of our mission for thinking about what our clothing was going to be. So we were doing our first day walking the South Shore of Staten Island, as we mentioned earlier. The South Shore has all sorts of interesting aspects to it that we're going to talk about. But we were walking down Amboy Road, which is one of, I'd say, 3 major roads in the South Shore of Staten Island. The other 2 being Arthur Kill Road and Highland Boulevard. So walking down Amboy, and we're in an area that's very wooded, not great sidewalks situation, which is common of all 3 of those roads as well. And we come upon a business. The business name escapes me right now. I don't know if we should bother to look it up or not.
Yeah.
It was a garage of some sort. And it was right in the Mount Loretto State Forest area, for those that want to go onto their devices and look it up immediately. And we were walking by, and a gentleman calls out to me and goes, "Hey, where'd you get those clothes?" Now, I was wearing that day a silk shirt, purple, gold, green, kind of looking like a ink blot pattern in a way.
Sure.
Looking very like late 80s, early 90s, I would say. And then some purple pants as well to go with that. And his first response to me was, "Hey, where'd you get those clothes? I used to wear those in the 60s in Washington Square."
He said he had that shirt.
Did he say specifically
He said
had
he
that
had
shirt?
that shirt.
Which is funny because it's actually a woman's shirt.
I don't think he had that shirt.
No, I don't think
But
he had that shirt.
he probably had a shirt that had the same colors or something, or was also silky or something like that.
Yeah. It has the buttons on the other side, but in all other, it doesn't have like shoulder pads or anything like that.
Yeah.
It's just a blousy silk shirt that I acquired at a store just above in NoHo, at this kind of, it's like a antique store that sells shirts in bulk like that.
Yeah,
So,
it's the one that has the lion, right?
yes,
Yeah.
I forget the name of the store as well.
All the things, or whatever.
Yeah. So my response to him was, "Well, what happened to the shirt? What happened to the clothes?" And he said, "Oh, my mother got rid of all those." And this proceeded into a conversation that was ultimately, I think, what we're looking to achieve when we're wearing these clothes, and something that I think will happen more frequently as we wear these fall clothes.
Yeah.
And we ended up getting involved in a 15-minute conversation with this very assertive, I mean, I don't know, gregarious or boisterous kind of approximates it, but isn't quite the same either. He's definitely a person that likes to control the conversation. Was not somebody that was being mean or anything.
No.
But definitely somebody that you were kind of like looking for if you went against whatever his opinion was. You might start getting into a fight with him, I think, at the same time. We did not cross opinions in any way, but he was, asking what we were doing, and immediately we got engaged in a conversation about Staten Island. He also seemed to know a lot about the city, or he fancied himself as a person that knew a bunch about the city. He had some like stray history facts here and there, but conversational history facts, things that, you wouldn't necessarily question during the course of the conversation, but the knowledge might not be any deeper than whatever you were getting at that point. So, yeah, he seemed to have his grandson with there, and maybe his son, or
yeah, we assumed maybe that's what the relationship was.
Yeah,
but.
And so the grandson came up, very quiet young kid, and he was like, "Hey Anthony, these are your parents now, huh?
Yeah.
Pay attention to them. Be good."
I think we did dispute that fact.
We did, yes, of course. I said, don't listen to him. He's not telling the truth.
Yeah, and I said, I am not your parent.
Yeah. And then the dad or the uncle or whatever, took the kid to the car while we're still talking to this man, and he's shouting after the kid, saying, Anthony, ragu sauce. Look up ragu sauce. Anthony, you love the sauce, Anthony. It's a commercial. Your dad doesn't remember, but look it up on the phone. You're going to love it. And it was...
Yeah, it's always great when you're having a conversation with someone and then they start just yelling nonsense at a child as they're trying to leave, It's like, okay, well...
Yeah, exactly.
It's a good way to end a conversation, but I don't even think that's what he was trying to do. I think he was just... this is happening, that's happening, this is happening, Yeah, so it was fun to talk to him for a bit.
It was, for a bit. We had about the extent of what we wanted to talk to him about. But one of the things that he brought up, which is not unique to him, is in fact fairly common when talking to people around here, and also, honestly, when talking to all New Yorkers, which I think is a really compelling subject, is the concept of knowing neighborhoods.
Yeah.
So we brought up, we told him that we were, doing this walk around. He was interested enough to ask where we're staying.
Right.
And we told him the St. George area near the ferry. And he was like, oh, that's a bad neighborhood. You got to watch out for around there, you know.
And that was actually one thing that we semi-disputed because I said, oh, I like it.
Yeah. And he was like, don't go out after dark. They'll strip your bones. They'll eat you like chicken bones or something like that was what he said. And, we continued the conversation from there. And this is something that we've had happen with multiple different people in Staten Island. But as I just said, it's also something that as we've thought about it more after we departed from his presence, this is a thing that I think most New Yorkers talk about.
Yeah.
The idea of, asking what neighborhood you're from or asking what neighborhood you're going to, or anytime a neighborhood comes up in general, people have an opinion as to whether it's a good neighborhood or bad neighborhood, as to whether it's a safe neighborhood or not a safe neighborhood.
Right, and they want to tell you that opinion.
And so we've started to, talk about why it is that people do that.
Mm-hmm.
And this includes friends of ours that are not people that are looking to discriminate. They're fairly progressive people.
Yeah.
And I think it comes down to several different things. I think it's kind of like talking about the weather as far as New York goes. It's like, or like talking about the trains or
Yeah.
something like that.
Or even like, this is something I thought of just now. If you do live in the suburbs and it's like, oh, have you been to Trexlertown recently? They just put in this new mall and they just did this and there's a new apartment complex over there. And it's kind of just like what's happening in the neighborhood too.
Yeah, yeah. And of course, historically, well, in the history of the past, 50 to 70 years, all the generations that live in the city, crime was a big topic of conversation
Right.
for a meaningful amount of it.
Right.
So that, I think, remains as an artifact of, New York history.
Mm-hmm.
In addition to that, I think there is a component where people feel like they want to offer you advice and offer you safety
Mm-hmm.
by communicating what a bad neighborhood is and what to watch out for.
Mm-hmm.
I think it also enables people to communicate an idea that they have knowledge of the city, which is a boost for self-esteem for somebody that's communicating that to you.
Right.
And I think finally, and most importantly for figuring it out, is that for people that particularly live in the city and grew up here, they had, as anybody has in the course of their lifetime, both trauma and a direction from adults, parents, as to how to maintain safety.
Right.
And so if you go to an area and you feel anxious or you feel unwelcome or people are making you feel unwelcome, then you internalize those things and you identify that as a bad neighborhood. And if
Or at least as like, don't go over there, or yeah, that's a neighborhood that'll make me feel uncomfortable. And then yes,
It
it
gets shorthand,
translates
yeah.
into right.
Yeah. And so the parents are telling you not to go there because they've maybe internalized something previously. Their fear for your being compromised in some way, for you being, hurt. They can't protect you personally all the time, so they want to instill something in you that will program you to not be, hurt.
Right.
And yeah, I think that the experience that we have as children and teenagers get internalized, even if like they're not the most traumatic things. That feeling of discomfort, particularly when you're younger, goes deeper and is more set and is less likely to be thought about later in life,
Right.
because it might not even be a thing that for some people, you can go back and like identify a thing that was traumatic and then maybe work on it. But there might be just the act of walking down the street and feeling uncomfortable is traumatic, but in retrospect doesn't register as a traumatic event.
Right. Well, I also think, so if I think about my own experience coming into the city, I had the anytime I came into the city as a kid, I was usually with family, and it was always, don't go out of my sight, hold on to my hand, we're going to cross the street now, we're going to a show, or we're going to this restaurant, or we're doing this thing, and you're all together, and you're staying in one little area. And then when I started coming into the city as a teenager, it was usually with a class field trip or something, and it was, okay, we're going to go to this museum, and you can go off on your own, but only stay within this range. Because you have to get back on the bus or something. Like, I would never try to go on the subway or go too far because I just needed to know my directions, and I needed to get back and not miss the bus back home and get in trouble. And then when I came to move here, there was sort of this like, okay, you're going to the city. You're going into this urban environment where like there's so many people, there's so many things happening. Be careful, be aware. And so I think since I've lived here, I don't necessarily distinguish between or from the beginning, I didn't necessarily distinguish between neighborhoods. You know, I first moved here, I moved to the East Village. Like, that's not a neighborhood that maybe years ago people would say, watch your back there, but within the last 15 years, that's not really a neighborhood that people would typically say, oh, that's a bad neighborhood. But I moved here from Allentown, Pennsylvania, so from the very beginning, I was always kind of aware of my surroundings and didn't necessarily know the different neighborhoods, so I'd cross one street and just like, okay, I'm still aware of my surroundings. I'm going back home, I'm still aware of my surroundings. We moved to Brooklyn, I'm like aware of I'm just like looking around, I'm taking it all in, I'm making my own decisions on what feels safe and what doesn't. Maybe I won't turn down this dark alleyway, but maybe, you know. Whereas if you grew up here too, I would imagine it's similar to how I grew up, where it's like, okay, stay within the neighborhood because of like timing, and you have to get back for dinner and you have to do this, and this is where we know people, and if something happens, like, they'll recognize you.
Mm-hmm.
So it's probably a similar thing. The thing about living in a city where there are so many people, and a city like New York City, where it's segregated. So saying stay within this border, either intentionally or unintentionally, does end up translating into stay near the people that look like you.
Mm-hmm.
And don't go into the neighborhoods where people don't look like you.
Well, and that's specifically for white people too, because I think the inverse of this is really, when it comes down to it, it isn't communicated this way, but there aren't really any good neighborhoods for people of color. The inverse of this, which is like, if you go to a neighborhood where you are not of the same color as that neighborhood, people are going to think you're a suspect, and that's a bad neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
And if you are in your own neighborhood, you are, if you look at the crime statistics, more likely to be a victim of crime than somebody that is white. Because, I don't know, I mean, who knows what the reasoning for that is, because you're in that neighborhood, or because people think that you're less likely to be believed by the police or to have your crime followed up on. Who knows? But the bottom line is, like, either you're a suspect or you are a likely victim of a crime. And stay inside your boundaries. Yeah, I guess it's because, if you're a person of color and you're going to a white area, it's because you could be a suspect and a victim in a different way,
Yeah, or treated poorly in some way, or, made to feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Like you don't belong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is stories that we've heard from people here about going to different parts in Staten Island.
Yeah.
It's a real thing. And it's not just the people that we've spoken to this month, but I think that's a pretty broadly understood idea, in popular society.
Yeah.
So I think the thing that makes this tricky is it feels like an innocuous conversation, maybe, or just something that casually is brought up and you just move on from, and there's not really a strong language built around how to talk about the idea of somebody bringing up that an area is a bad neighborhood or not.
Right.
And without kind of halting the conversation in its tracks, you know? So we're talking to this guy that's, as far as we're concerned, I wouldn't say that I liked him or I hated him, but I was interested in kind of speaking with him for a few minutes so that I could understand the place that he's from and just get some information on what it's like to be one of these people here.
Yeah, to me he seemed like a character from the neighborhood.
Yeah.
And we're studying the neighborhood right now.
And then so, I think the kind of the most straightforward way to have that conversation becomes, he said, oh, it's a bad neighborhood. And you go, what do you mean? And he goes, well, there's a lot of poor people and a lot of crime there. And it's like, well, why is it a problem that there's a lot of poor people there?
Yeah.
And then he has to explain why it's a problem that there's poor people there. And inevitably, either you're not really going to get him to go, oh, you're right. I don't know why I've ever thought that.
Yeah, or maybe you could, but it's like one person at a time.
I'm
even wrestling with that understanding myself. Like, we're bringing it up, we're thinking about it, but I'm also wrestling with, like, why do I feel, why do we kind of consider areas where it's not as well maintained to be more dangerous? Like, we do, I think most people do associate that with, I gotta watch my back, or I have to look out, or it's a little more chaotic here, and that's, I have to think about that myself as I walk around and, like, wrestle with that thought and why are those thoughts coming into my head. And I think to put someone on the spot to think about that in conversation, maybe possibly for the first time they've ever thought about it.
Yeah. I don't think it's unreasonable to think that being in an area that is not well kept is an area that you have to be more aware of, because I think an area that is demonstrating disorder signals to anybody around it that disordered behavior is more likely and permissible. The problem for me is that people then start blaming the neighborhood and the people that are there for that. And that's not, there are forces more complicated than the people there that are causing that disorder.
Oh, of course,
So a good example is Jersey Street, which is just down the block from where we're staying right now, which we've had an interesting kind of ongoing dialogue about this past month. We've had people tell us that it's not a safe area, and in fact,
multiple people,
and in fact, one person in particular told us to stay away from that street, and then we decided, well, let's go walk it and see what it's like. And we walked it. There wasn't anything that made us feel like demonstrably unsafe. But then we got home and found out that there had been a shooting just a couple of blocks from where we had been walking on Jersey Street.
Like an hour before.
No, a half hour before. And we had heard a woman tell her 2 children, get home before dark, the lights aren't working right now. And we were like, that's a little strange.
Yeah.
And it had to have been directly a consequence. We had
also seen a helicopter flying above. And
that's right.
We had kind of joked with each other, oh, I bet it's flying above Jersey Street. And it was.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
so obviously there's some real stuff that's happening on that street. The feeling that I get walking on that street is something that I would describe as like noise, which is to say that there's a lot of things going on at any one time, and you have to be very aware of those things. And for me, my metric for what is safe or unsafe is my comfort level being exceeded to a degree where I think I'm projecting that. If I recognize that I have discomfort in me, but I can understand that it's coming from myself principally, and I can maintain that, or it's coming from my external environment, but I feel in command enough of myself that I'm not going to project that insecurity, then it's comfortable for me, and I can recognize that that is something I can navigate. I haven't reached the level where my discomfort is exceeded. And so, that's where we are right now. But as far as disorder, the woman, mentioned that their lights weren't working, and there are some police lights down there. And those, for those that haven't seen those ever, they are mobile lighting units, that basically lighting poles that the police set up in areas that are presumably high crime.
Look like they run on a generator or something.
Yeah, well,
they kind of like roll up.
And they make noise, and they illuminate an area. And that for me is really problematic, because if it's necessary for there to be lights there, then they should build lights there. Like, the city
Yeah.
should make it so that there's lighting there. There should not be a NYPD branded lighting system
Yeah.
in the area, because that communicates to not only the people that live, to the people that don't live there, to the people that live there, that this is an area that needs to be controlled by the police.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, that's true. It does add to that story of, oh, it's a bad neighborhood. There's always police lights there. The police are always there. And then for the people that live there, it's like, oh, cool, we're being just like watched all the time. And it makes it so that people avoid it, so that aren't from the area. So it just allows for like whatever is happening to just circle on itself.
well, and it also, look, this isn't coming from a place of like, being naive. There
Yeah.
are people, there are individuals that are bad, that exist in areas. And if you put a NYPD light in the middle of an area, there are people that are going to take that as like a badge of honor and pride and a distinction that this is a bad neighborhood, and they're going to start leveraging the fact that it's a bad neighborhood and start doing bad things in order to live up to that reputation and
Right.
take on that attitude. So you're just enabling the problems that you are, I don't even know if you're looking to solve. You're just trying to, it's like keeping the kitchen light on so that the roaches don't come in, And like the roaches are inevitably going to come in anyway. So like, figure out how to actually deal with the problem. Then
Yeah, it seems more like asserting some sort of power or dominance, or, pretending like, hey, look, we're here, we are going to control this situation, but like in our way that isn't really helpful,
yeah.
but more just in a way that's like, look, we're the law and order and we're here
Yeah.
and we see you.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what it feels like to me.
Yeah.
So that's our current ongoing thoughts with respect to what a bad neighborhood is.
Yeah.
Which is to say that for me, I feel like there are no bad neighborhoods. And I feel like that's the guiding principle that I want to continue to move forward with, and see how we can kind of build a further idea around that.
Yeah. And I think this relates actually a lot to something that we were feeling, or at least I was feeling a lot in our walk this week in the South Shore of Staten Island, which, this idea of when people feel uncomfortable, they start labeling it as a bad neighborhood. I did not feel comfortable walking around most of the neighborhoods in South Staten Island. It is the things that made me feel uncomfortable. Super homogenous. Felt like more wealth. Felt like people were noticing that we stood out. There weren't a ton of people walking around, and we were walking through a lot of neighborhoods. And when we saw people, it wasn't necessarily unfriendly towards us, but if we try to say hi, occasionally someone would say hi. But a lot of times we were met with this kind of like face of judgment, or some kind of feeling of that maybe they're uncomfortable. Like, who are these people in our neighborhood? Why do they look colorful? Or why are they wearing masks? Or whatever it was, totally projecting on exactly what someone's thinking, but not welcoming. And then also a lot of flags for different things. There's the American flag, which, whatever, okay, that is what it is right now. But then there's also a lot of Trump flags and other flags that seem to represent something that to me is very scary right now and very discomfort or uncomfortable for me. And signs near Trump flags that say, "Don't take this flag down or I'll shoot you," like that signals to me way more danger. I want to interact in that neighborhood. I'm like really running through that neighborhood way more than a neighborhood that just has some disheveled houses.
Yeah. There were Blue Lives Matter flags as well. Don't tread on me flags. There wasn't. I didn't see any Confederate flags.
I didn't see any Confederate flags either, so that's good, I guess. But
Yeah.
I mean, it's good.
Yeah.
But the other ones are confusing. We actually had a lot of conversation about the Don't Tread on Me flags, and I took a moment to just look up the history of that, because I was confused to see those alongside of the Trump flags and the Blue Lives Matter flags. And often all of those would be in the same yard. And because my understanding of the Don't Tread on Me flag was that it was kind of like an anti-government flag. And it is. So it comes from during the Revolutionary War. It was an anti-British flag and a flag for freedom. And over time, so in the beginning it was used a lot. Often it would be accompanied by the join or die symbol, which has the cut up snake. So I think it's less of like you as an individual join our club or die, but more we are many different pieces. We must join or we will die.
Mm-hmm.
So that was often part of the message with the Don't Tread on Me. And the idea of the Don't Tread on Me flag or symbol was don't control me. We are independent. We deserve liberty, right? And so there was a period of time, I guess, where it wasn't very popular. And then after September 11th in 2001, people started to use it again. And I guess before that, there was some sort of like libertarian interest with the Don't Tread on Me symbols. And then apparently it really got popular again when Obama was president. And then it's been sort of taken at this point by current libertarians and ultra right-wing political people and the Tea Party. And it's it's a really interesting thing, just in general, how symbols can be transformed and taken over. Because if you think about, like, it's anti-government, it's about liberty. To hang this anti-government, like, don't tread on me, I want to be free flag next to a blue lives, like a blue line flag, like a police flag, it's like, that's like the law and order thing.
Yeah.
But then the don't tread on me thing should be like anti-law and order.
Yeah.
So you're not really saying anything except that like the thing that it ends up communicating to someone like me is, oh, a white supremacist lives there. And you don't want to be told to accept all people. And you don't like the unity that people are looking for. And so you want some people to be tread on, but you don't want to be tread on for your beliefs.
Yeah.
And your viewpoint, and you want to continue to be the leader or the person that's higher up in society.
Yeah.
That's what it communicates to me.
Yeah, I mean, it's just aggression and it's about power and dominance. And I don't think many people are thinking as far as you are.
Yeah.
But that is what their actions do.
Yeah.
And the more I see the Blue Lives Matter, and then, we were seeing the blue and red lives matter, where it's like the blue line meets a red line, so it's supposed to be fire. And then we saw one, I swear, it had 5 different colors on it. It looked more like a Jamaican flag than a U.S. flag. And it was like for essential workers and first responders and things
Yeah.
like that. And I thought to myself, how backwards are we now that this, I mean, in 20 years ago or whatever, this would be considered a complete disrespect to the flag. Or even like 10 years ago. This is a complete mangling and changing of the American flag. And now, because, I guess because in some ways, it was allowed for this side of the conversation to co-opt the flag entirely, that they now feel that there's enough ownership over the flag that they can change it to whatever they want.
Yeah.
And I think that's really unfortunate. And I don't know where we go from here moving forward, but it does seem incredibly hypocritical among an ocean of other hypocritical things that you would change the red, white, and blue flag to a black and white flag with a single blue line.
Right.
Or like sometimes they have now the Punisher logo, so it's a skull on a black and white flag with a blue line, and it's just like, how is this any reasonable level of acceptable?
Right.
So
Right. And how do you hear something like Black Lives Matter, not take the time to even consider what people are trying to communicate, that there is a group of people in this country that don't feel like they're being heard or seen or respected, and that we're trying to say, hey, this group of people matters too. Like that's what the Black Lives Matter means, right? How do you see that? And then say, well, I guess I can kind of see the jump to like, well, blue, it doesn't, to be clear, no. But I can see where people's thought process are. They feel defensive, right? To do the Blue Lives Matter or the All Lives Matter thing. Like, no, if you're listening to this and that's what you think, call me. I'll explain why that's wrong. But to then make a flag that's like essential workers, firefighters, police, like you're listing off a whole bunch of people. Why would you not include, like at that point, if you really think that all lives matter, if that's the concept that you believe in, why would you then not start also adopting the Black Lives Matter? Why is that not also part of your flag? Like if you're so mad because it's only one group of people and you think that that's going against you, why are you not including that group of people?
Because they're the enemy in this situation.
Well, yeah, and you're only supporting the lives that are actively oppressing that group of people. Like, it just doesn't hold up. I know that there's all these talking points that people have, and they might be able to win a debate on points, but it doesn't hold up.
Yeah. Well.
And anyway, we're seeing a lot of these flags, and we've been seeing all these things this week, and yeah, it's hard. It's hard to see. It makes me angry. It's bullshit.
It is obviously close to election time, so it's unclear whether or not this level of flags would be out right now. We walked down Highland Boulevard, and there are flags just on that road. It's unclear how long the flags have been up.
Yeah.
But they are definitely an area-sponsored thing, not just a, individual home thing.
Yeah.
And, we just came off the previous conversation when we're saying that there are no bad neighborhoods, and I still believe that. I don't think that there are bad neighborhoods. I think that this neighborhood is unusual to anywhere else in the city in that it's really looking to project messages to people that are coming into it.
Yeah. I think I find it a little unfortunate. We've had such a nice time on the West Shore and the East Shore and the North Shore of Staten Island, exploring all the nature and the beaches and seeing just how the neighborhoods change and all these sorts of things that we really weren't expecting. It is very diverse, and there's all sorts of different people and different, shops and restaurants. And I mean, not that many shops and restaurants, but the ones we see are all sort of like varied, like things in them and types of food and whatnot. And then I've been feeling so pleasantly surprised by what I'm finding, because what I had this idea of Staten Island being was more homogenous, sort of like blue collar city worker, police, firefighter, expected racism. And I was like, wow, I haven't really been seeing this at all. This is great. And then we go to the South Shore of Staten Island, and it's all the shit that I thought Staten Island was. It's there. And it's like, you guys are ruining the reputation of your borough. It makes me think, like, no wonder it's the forgotten borough, because there's this heavy thing pulling it down, and it's just disappointing.
Yeah, well, it is definitely the closest thing to what the rest of the country represents, or portions of the rest of the country. It doesn't really exist except in isolated strains throughout the rest of the city. We encountered it when we were on our Rockaway walk, when we went over to, what's the neighborhood? It's escaping me right now.
Broad Channel.
Broad Channel.
No. Well, we
Broad
did
Channel.
in Broad Channel
A little bit in Broad Channel.
But the one that we were, Breezy Point.
Breezy Point and Broad Channel. Those are smaller areas of concentration.
But they're also not quite as in your face. Like, it's, you might see one flag over the, or one small sign or something. But then most of the messages are about strength, and like, it's not so in your face, like, aggressive.
Yeah.
Maybe people over there lean differently than we do politically, but it doesn't feel like this anger and this aggression and this like excitement that's really like hellish.
Well, there's also a beach town aesthetic to that, which comes with it all sorts of other connotations, and an avenue for acceptance, because people are coming and going.
Right.
There's a tidal understanding of the way of life. And with the South Shore Staten Island stuff, there is a lot of it's settlement. There's not a lot of churn, because there's nobody coming through that area really. You have to be going to there. Otherwise, there's no reason to be there. So that creates a situation where there's not a lot of exposure for anything other than the community that you grew up with, and then as a consequence, maybe people aren't leaving either.
Right.
And there's a lot of expensive home ownership as well, which creates gated communities and isolation also. So just not a lot of ability to see other perspectives. And yeah, I mean, I don't think it's great for it to all be isolated down into that area. I mean, I guess the fact that it's isolated creates it, so it's hard to say, but the fact that people in the greater New York City area don't have access to that personality type on a regular basis is in its own way not good for the city, because it doesn't give people the opportunity to come to grips with it and encounter it, and then they think that their way of life is the only way of life that exists or makes sense. And makes sense, that's a debatable topic, but there are still millions and millions of people that feel the same way in America. And I think a lot of people in the city think, well, that's an over there issue, and I don't know how to come to grips with it. But it's not an over there issue. It's, you can take a train or a boat and get over there in an hour to
Yeah.
experience what that situation is.
And I guess even there is kind of I think it's a really hard thing to tackle, and trying to have conversation, like, there's not a lot of access to having conversations with people that might think so drastically different from you, and actually it's really hard to do it in a way that might allow either person to sort of understand the other better, because it's just so different. It seems to be built on not just like one idea. It's like many, many, many different ways of seeing the world and understanding society. So it's daunting to think about trying to find any sort of like middle ground. And then I think also living in New York, when it comes to this as a political issue, we go blue. Like we are going to vote Democratic always right now. I mean, like, it doesn't feel like, oh my gosh, we have to turn the tide or we have to convince these people. It's kind of like, well, there's this one area of New York that doesn't agree with what most of the rest of the city agrees with. And so, okay, like, they're going to lose anyway. They might have, like, their city council person that represents them that doesn't agree with the rest of city council, but whatever. Like, I think that is really kind of the attitude of a lot of people in New York. And I don't know. I don't know if that's bad or good, or I don't really have a judgment on it, but it does keep us kind of like just separated.
Yeah. I mean, I think the most valuable thing for me is to recognize what you had said earlier, which is you didn't feel comfortable in this area. And I think it's good to be able to expose yourself to a lot of different areas in New York where you don't feel comfortable.
Yeah.
So that you can understand the character of the whole experience.
Yeah.
And that's what we've set ourselves up to do.
Yeah.
So I think that we should talk about bagels.
Yeah, I think it's time to talk about bagels. Lighten the mood here.
We're lightening the mood. We're finding the hole in the the delicacy. I don't know.
That's good. That's a good metaphor.
That was good.
Tell me about your bagel experience in Staten Island, Mike.
Oh, thank you for the segue. Yes. So we have gone an entire month in Staten Island. I have been judiciously holding my opinions on the bagel culture here in order to give a full report at the conclusion. I don't recall the number offhand, but I would say I have had bagels from 16 different bagel shops this week.
That's one.
This
That's
month.
One every day except for once a week.
Yeah.
You have a once a week non-bagel.
I try once a week to
Surprise.
not have a bagel. For those that are not familiar with the program, I have a bagel pretty much every morning, sometime between 9 and 10, at a different location around our given walk route. I have an everything with scallion because that I wanted to have a control in order to judge each bagel store on an even playing field. I think that the scallion cream cheese is nice because it gives us a little complexity, see what you do with the different flavoring, but it isn't so off the deep end, and also something that people would more likely to be ordering. And then the everything bagel, generally the favorite bagel of everyone, but also allows for enough expression from the bagel store place if they're so inclined to express themselves. So, lots of interesting things to say about the Staten Island bagel culture that I had no idea existed prior to coming here. The first one, there are a lot of shops that are multi-function bagel shops.
Mm-hmm.
This is not something that you see as much in any of the other boroughs. If you do see it, I tend to discount it a little bit, insofar as I believed prior to coming here that if you're trying to do a lot of things and be a bagel store, you're not going to do the bagels as good as you could.
Of course. I mean, you're not getting your hair done at the auto mechanic.
No, you're not.
You want your bagels from a bagel store.
Yes. So because there were so many of these locations that I was observing in Staten Island, I wanted to be able to give them a fair shake. And so the first couple weeks I was going into these types of bagel and deli and superette, things like that. And it has some interesting aspects to it. It feels very much like a deli. And typically when you go into a bagel store, there are a very limited amount of options available to you. There's the deli case that has the cream cheeses and maybe some cold cuts, some lox, and then it has the bagel bins next to it, and then it'll have the fridges where you can get drinks. These bagel convenience store locations, basically you could do your grocery shopping and get the bagels.
Mm-hmm.
So that's pretty interesting.
Some of them are, because I can't eat the bagels, sometimes I like that.
Yeah.
Because sometimes they'll have the cold salads and stuff too, like the mozzarella salad or like the egg salad or something like that. And then I can do my own review of the place, which I haven't actually, but I could. I'd at least have the option.
Yeah. There are even some locations that had seating, which is very unusual for a bagel store. So one place called Bagel Bistro had diner booths set up and then an outdoor area as well. So it just had so many functions. It also served a lot of Greek food. We didn't engage in any of that.
No.
But it was interesting to see, and definitely that location received high marks when I reviewed the interior of it. So one of the 3 metrics that I've been using for the bagel store reviews: the interior of the location, the bagel itself, and the cream cheese. So it was very interesting to go in and see what this setup was like. And as I said, not a very common situation in the rest of the city, but fairly common here to be doing 2 things at once. Ultimately, after trying to give these places a chance for a couple weeks, I did come to the conclusion that the bagels at these locations are substandard. Or, I guess, maybe not substandard, they're standard, or maybe slightly above standard. However, if I'm going for a bagel, I don't want that experience. I'd like a good bagel.
Yeah.
So I really started to avoid them after the first couple weeks when I thought to myself, I'm seeing what I'm getting here. I tried to give it an open opportunity, but ultimately my preconceived notions were confirmed. These bagels are not getting the time and interest. They might not even be made here. It's unclear. And there was even some stores where I was going into and it felt like I was at a gas station convenience store where there was a little kiosk essentially where the bagels were, and then you were just one person manning that situation, and yet the exterior of the store is just all decals of these bagel people dancing and having a good time. I give them credit for making the exterior of the place look like it was a bagel shop, but that was not the case.
It's a trick.
It's a trap.
Yeah. Bagel trap.
Yeah. Bagel trap. Don't go to that store. So that was one of the interesting things. Also, I would say a lot of those places are up in the north versus the south. The concentration of bagel stores on the whole is possibly greater than any of the other boroughs. Certainly greater than my casual experience walking through thus far. There are some bagel deserts in different boroughs. It's maybe a sparser bagel amount in the north of Staten Island versus the south, I will say that. But even in the north, it's pretty readily available. And then in the south, there are everywhere. And I think that kind of befits some of the suburban values that exist down there. The ability to get bagels is something that is treasured in the suburban area. So
Yeah, the suburban New York areas.
yes,
Yeah.
for sure. So there's that. As far as the character of the bagel itself in Staten Island, what I've observed to this point, and I guess will remain my conclusion because we're not coming back here anytime soon, the bagels are large to extra large size, bigger than anything that we've encountered thus far. I'm sure we
How big?
I mean,
I've seen them, but I'm asking. As big as your face?
I don't know.
One of them was.
Bigger. They were pretty close to, I don't know, what size would you consider that?
6 inches
6 inches?
diameter.
Well, I mean they're bigger than a tea plate. I would say that, some of the biggest ones.
Yeah.
Even the smallest.
Maybe even 8 inches.
Yeah, the smallest ones are still, very big.
Yeah.
The holes in the bagel, generally pretty small, very super puffy, and they are usually toppinged, because it's an everything bagel, toppinged on one side only. I think there were 2 locations that had toppings on both sides. But in general, just one side only. They weren't particularly creative with the toppings. It was, like garlic, poppy, sesame. There was some onions on a couple of them, but no rye seeds or different colored poppy or sesame seeds rather, or anything like that you might experience in different boroughs. There was not salt on a lot of them. There was salt made on the bagel, but then they, melted, I guess, during the process. So there was not a ton of extra salt. That, of course, is I consider a prerequisite to get into the good to very good bagel territory, is there being extra salt crystals on the bagel so that you can kind of really experience it while you're eating it, get that, that real punch of salt.
Yeah.
But again, they were in the process of making the bagel, so you can still experience it on the shell, in general. So they're big. They're generally very chewy. There was some that were very difficult to chew, but by and large, they weren't too difficult to chew. And as far as some highlights, there were 3 bagel stores that I'll call out right now. There was Bagel Depot in Eltingville, which stuck out for me, not because of the experience of eating the bagel I had, so much as it was strikingly apparent to me that it would be great with lox, which is not a part of the test right now. But there are some bagels that are meant to be bagels that are like sandwich bagels, like Russ and Daughters in the city. The bagel is actually not very good, I would say, but the consistency of the bagel is such that it really lends itself structurally to lox and to have it be more like a sandwich. And this was one bagel place that was like that. It did have a number of salt crystals, which is nice. The concentration of toppings was on the light side, which isn't necessarily bad, and in fact for the lox situation I think is pretty good, because it would be just enough to give you the essence of the everything bagel, but really to put the focus on the lox itself. So I would go back potentially and try lox from the Bagel Depot location in Eltingville. That was one.
I guess it's good to know what kind of bagel you should going for.
Totally.
You're just getting your control bagel.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's nice of you to figure that out for people.
I mean, I'm not just figuring it out for people. It struck me.
You're figuring it out for yourself too.
Yeah. I mean, it really. It's not like I've had another bagel really during this trial where I thought this would be good with lox in the same way that it came to me. The second one is Bagels and Buns. That's in Westerly.
Bagels and buns.
That's right. And that had exceptional cream cheese.
Mm.
And so the thing about this cream cheese, and the thing about cream cheese in general, is that I think the best cream cheese is warm, not cold. And you're going to get most of your cream cheeses served to you cold because they're in the deli case and they come out from there. And I get it. There's probably some, code that you have to adhere to as far as
Food preparer, handler, whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
You'll get a B.
I mean, I think it would be better to have it out of the case while you're, at peak volume and distributing it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you're getting a warm bagel, then problem solved, right? The bagel warms the cream cheese and everything is copacetic. But in general, I don't think that cold cream cheese is very good. It's fine. It's good. I'll certainly eat it, and most of them are. But I think that the optimal version is warm. That said, this particular instance of cream cheese was served cold, but it was probably the best version I can conceive of it being cold. It was vegetal from the scallion. It was luscious and creamy. It had a quality like a Schlag or a whipped cream, a German whipped cream. It was very, very rich and silky. And the reason that I'm so anti-cold cream cheese typically is that it starts getting clumpy as a consequence. And then the texture is not correct, and it feels heavy, and it's not really where you want to be. Here, for whatever reason, I don't understand why, but it may have been that it was just the right time when I got it, where it had been whipped and then just reached that chilled point, but still retained some of the lightness. But whatever it was, it really exceeded my expectations. I gave it a 4.75 out of 5. I couldn't give it a 5 because I have to know it's a 5 when I have it.
I wonder if anyone's going to get a 5.
I don't know.
That's like a big, now that you're doing so many, if you were eating them all in a row and then you were rating them afterwards, you could definitely give a 5. But like doing it along the way, and like you have 9 months of bagels left, and we are going into Manhattan, and you would think that the bagels in Manhattan would be better than the bagels in Staten Island. I don't know. I
wouldn't
happen.
necessarily say that, and I'll come to a
Okay.
full summation at the conclusion of all the bagels in a second. But yeah, that cream cheese, smoking hot because it's cold. And then I would say the best bagel that I experienced in the borough was Bagels on the Boulevard. That was in Dongan Hills on Highland Boulevard, unsurprisingly. And that had a really just solid combination of interior bagel and cream cheese. The interior was a bagel place for sure. It had a really great presentation of the cream cheeses, which doesn't necessarily matter a ton to me, but I like the intention. It had lox on display. It had lots of different pastries, if that's what you're looking for. Had a long line of drinks available for selection. It had morning talk radio playing on overhead.
Oh, yeah.
And it was just like classic rock, ridiculousness and like prank call show things.
Yeah, I love those.
And it had
So trashy.
yeah, and it had a bunch of classical bagel employees working behind the counter, very efficient, got some good personality, and all the signage on there was on point, very specific to the store. It just set a great vibe. The bagel itself, great crunchiness to it. The shell was like it snapped in your mouth, which was great. The topping ratio was very solid. Didn't have on both sides, again, not a thing that happens in Staten Island very often, but the distribution was very good, had salt on it, which is nice. And the cream cheese itself, not bagels and buns, mind you, but it was warmer, which I liked. It did benefit from some warmth of the bagel, which was nice. and it was just a smooth, tangy, had some of that scallion punch in there, and that was the best experience I had for Staten Island bagels. So close second was Bagel Hut, which was only a couple blocks down the street, and it had a much more substantial crunch to the bagel. It was something that it really strode the line between difficult to chew and unpleasant, and pleasantly difficult to chew, which is a very hard line to walk, but they managed to do it. I think the only reason that I didn't go with that as the superior bagel was that it almost felt more like a really great crusty bread than a bagel. I mean, it was definitely still a bagel, but it ventured into that territory, and I thought that it wasn't really proper to make that the best bagel as a consequence. So that is kind of the 4 highlights of bagel shops. As far as bagels on the whole go in the borough, it definitely has a profile. Large bagels, again, toppings on one side. Convenience is king down here, being able to have access to it and being able to just to be able to go anywhere and have access to a bagel store, and to be able to live anywhere and not have to worry about where you're going to get your bagels. I think is very important. But ultimately, I think it was a little too one note for me, because everything was large and chewy. There was just not the variety of bagel looks that I would like to see, or at least that I get in other boroughs. There seems to be more of a, I don't know. I don't know if it's just a copycat situation here in Staten Island or what.
Yeah.
But there's a lack of diversity on the bagels.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, I guess the other places just want their own characters.
Maybe.
They want to put their mark on it.
Yeah. Or maybe maybe there's more people starting bagel shops that have worked at another bagel shop around here or something.
I guess I also might imagine that people kind of like stick to their neighborhood. Like if you go to a lot of the other boroughs, there's probably the local people that are getting their bagels, but then it's also like people are coming in to work, or they're like traveling through, or they're going to visit someone or whatever. It's like there's maybe a little more mobility, and like around here, I don't know if people are really like going across the island to try a bagel. Like you might just you have your spot and you go. It might be more like the vibe I get from Long Island, which, I mean, you're from there, I'm not, but like it seems like you drive to the bagel place.
Yeah.
And you get your bagels and you go home. So you're not like, oh, I'm going to go to the other bagel place today. You're just like, I'm going to the bagel place.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's fair. So overall, very pleased to have experienced the culture of the bagel stores here. Mm-hmm. And I look forward to taking this information to the other boroughs and forming an even fuller picture of what the landscape of city bagels looks like.
Yeah.
So 3 more areas we want to hit specifically about this walk route. We've talked a lot about the people that live there, and we talked a lot about the bagels that are there. But we want to cover the nature, kind of what the building type is like, and also just a little bit of summation on what Jesse calls the pigeon people. Mm-hmm. But we'll go first with the parks.
Well, you coined it. I've just been using it
You're
more.
right, I guess I did.
I think so.
You can put the blame on me if it's a problem.
I've been saying it a lot.
The parks, I mean, kind of mirror and even maybe are strengthened or stronger than what we've seen in North and Central, East, West Shores. They are kind of older forests. Mm-hmm. And there's also what's called the Blue Belt, which is a watershed area, collection of areas in the lower third of Staten Island that are meant to be a safeguard for water drain off to keep the, I guess, prevent flooding from happening more regularly and keep the drinking water safe and whatnot. And between the Mount Loretto unique area and state park that exists, between Wolf's Pond Park, between the conference house area at the bottom,
Clay Pits Pond
Clay
Park.
Pits State Park, and Bloomingdale Park.
Yes.
There are just so many opportunities for somebody that lives down here, or for somebody that's looking to travel from another borough, doesn't want to go upstate, but wants to go see some nature.
Yeah.
So many opportunities to get out in the wild.
I'd say particularly the Clay Pits Pond and Mount Loretto unique area
Yeah.
were very good with spaces to hike and motor on foot around. And the Clay Pits Pond park actually has an equestrian area too. We saw no actual horses, but we saw many signs of horse activity. Signs made by humans and signs made in the form of droppings
Yeah.
by horse.
Yeah.
It's mostly hay, it's fine.
Yeah, and there was a area where there were chickens and peacocks in cages, which would be fun for kids to visit.
Or adults.
Yeah, I mean, we
I
had a good
liked
time.
it. We had fun.
Yeah. So that was nice. And Wolf's Pond Park as well, I really enjoyed a lot. You can see a bunch of that area in the 360 video we made for the week. It has an area for migratory birds. It has some deep forest area, and it is readily accessible by car.
Yeah. And near the conference house too. And you can be right down at the bottom tip of the South Shore, and there's a bunch of old buildings that were part of it's called the conference house because there was a conference during the Revolutionary War after the Battle of Long Island. There were some attempts at peace negotiation, and so those old buildings are there, and they're nice to look at. They're not open right now. I think they're open during non-COVID times. I got the impression.
Yeah.
And there's some forest right around there and beach access. And it's quite nice.
It is. It almost feels like a wedding venue. I don't know if there are weddings there.
Is.
It may well be. And that was kind of the one spot we consistently visited each day this week.
Yeah.
Because it was at the very bottom of the island, so it felt like a nice place to do the turn. So there's that. And we mentioned the clay pits and the Bloomingdale Park. Those are on the kind of northern side of the South Shore.
Right.
And so there's a distinct split between that portion and the portion where the Mount Loretto area is, and the Wolf's Pond. The Mount Loretto and Wolf's Pond area, there's a lot more residences around it, it would seem, whereas there's much more industry towards the south end, and then the parks, and then not as much generally residential that seem to exist up there. So all in all, just more fantastic space to visit for those looking for a city getaway, or if you were living there, just an opportunity to connect with nature on a more regular basis.
Yeah.
So there's that. And then there were the houses that kind of occupied down there. And I guess just in general, talking about the profile of the buildings, there are a lot of mall areas. So, I don't know.
Kind of smaller, though, than like on the more northern and central parts of Staten Island, I feel like there were like these bigger industrial mall areas with like big strip malls.
Yeah.
And then in the southern shore, it felt more like there'd be like a plaza
Yeah.
where there's, you know, like a Walgreens and a Starbucks and a bagel shop and a bakery and a deli, and like that's it.
Yeah.
And then there'd be another one like a few miles away.
Yeah.
But not this like different than the central Staten Island where there's like an expanse of like a actual mall.
Yeah.
mall.
There's that one, the Staten Island Mall, I believe is what it's called.
Right.
That we would go by pretty routinely because it was plop in the middle
Yeah.
of many of our routes the first 3 weeks. Here, there were these plazas Jesse's referring to, and then there were also a number of smaller town feelings, particularly along Amboy Road, which you mentioned earlier. There's Arthur Kill to the north of this area, Amboy's in the middle, and then Highlands at the bottom. And walking down Amboy, a lot more, I don't know if they're officially historical designation homes, but they have that feel. And
Yeah.
just
A lot of homes that had awards.
that's right. Yeah.
They just have a little plaque that says award.
Yeah. And just again, these small town feels where
Yeah.
it's several blocks of like a pizza place, a convenience store, you know, maybe a dance studio or something
Yeah.
like that.
And then that's reminding me that on those streets, multiple times we saw the same group of young boys, like 7 to 10 years old, all with their bikes, sitting outside of this pizza place. And we must have just happened to be walking by like right at the end of school time, whatever school time means these days. But yeah, it was so funny. And they seemed like they were just like copies of adults, like small version copies of adults.
Right.
The way they were talking, the one kid was talking about like, oh yeah, I'm gonna go in and get soda. I know the owner in here, you know. I need the energy. And like the other kids just seemed to like, yeah, I get, like, sure, yeah, go get your, like no one questioned that. At one point they were riding their bikes behind us and yelled out, hey, you want to move to the side? There's a bunch of kids coming right here. Yeah, stay right there. They're like 7 years old. Like, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, they were.
It was funny
they were a little
to witness
crew.
that. Yeah.
And so I think that leads us pretty well into the pigeon people.
Yeah, so what we're calling the pigeon people is these groups of mostly elderly Italian men that set up in the parking lot of a park or the concrete area near the bathrooms at a beach, or mostly just in the parking lot of any given park. Sometimes like on a pier, but there'll be anywhere from like 6 to 25 men sitting in plastic chairs that they've brought, or folding chairs that they've brought, and just sitting there and like bullshitting.
Yeah. We talked about the beach pigeon people in week 2, and it's our awareness of this phenomenon has only grown since then. We have seen it at least in 8 different locations.
Yeah.
And it is really unusual because when you see this type of activity in other parts of the city, not only does it generally involve a greater diversity of age and whatnot and gender, and there are, mind you, some instances around here where it is actually not really a lot of kids, but there is a diversity of gender. But,
yeah, occasionally there'll be some women sitting with them too, but it's mostly old men.
Yeah, and so when you see this in other neighborhoods, in addition to the diversity, there is typically an activity that's happening. People are cooking, or there's a game of, street volleyball happening, or something.
Yeah, or they're eating, or they're drinking, or they're doing something.
And this really seems exclusively to be a freestyle bullshit session,
Yeah.
which is we're thinking like, why is this happening? And we think that we come to the conclusion that it is the evolution of stoop conversation back from when Staten Island received a wave of people back in the 60s. And this is people continuing that tradition in a way that, I don't know, I guess there are no stoops. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't think
wave of people from Brooklyn
Yeah.
and Queens.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, I don't know how many stoops I've seen, if any, since we've been here.
Yeah, there aren't a lot of apartment buildings.
Yeah.
And even, the houses that have, it's like house stairs, which is just completely different. You're not going to sit on your stoop and like yell to the next house that's 50 yards away or whatever,
Yeah. And for the places that they choose to set these things up are baffling. I mean, right in the middle of the parking lot when there is readily available grass anywhere,
Yeah.
or on the pathway of a park rather than the grass on either side, so that people come and walk through.
Yeah.
It's just like it almost feels like there is an element of needing to take up space that's generally meant for navigating around that fulfills it in some way.
Right.
And yeah.
Well, it's kind of like, it feels a little bit like tailgating without the whatever part of tailgating is eating.
Right.
Gating, I guess. They're still like at the tail of their car.
Yeah.
Kind of, like they're like, at any moment they could just like go into their own private space, like which kind of relates to the stoop thing too, where it's like at any moment you could just like go back into your apartment.
Yeah.
So like at any minute you could just like go in your car, I guess.
Yeah. And we were thinking how this might evolve into future generations, and something we did see at a couple of locations was dog runs being very popular.
Mm-hmm.
There was one where a whole community was getting a dog run up to speed after being closed for COVID for a really long time. And there was this other one we passed where we passed it at 8:30 at night, and there were still 3 men and 3 dogs in complete darkness with a tent set up where earlier in the day, and we only really know that it was early in the day because we passed it earlier in the day a couple of days later, there were maybe 20 people there with 20 dogs.
Yeah.
And it was just a community event to go down and hang out, and it seemed...
It's kind of cool. I like that.
Yeah.
It's because I definitely pay attention to the dog runs everywhere because I like dogs and we don't have one. And when you walk by a dog run in Manhattan or Brooklyn, it's usually a lot of like small dogs sort of interacting with each other. The owners talking to their dog and looking at their phone, but not talking to the other owners. Like you rarely see dog owners interacting with each other, but you often will see a dog owner like, "Hey, Sparky, get away from her. Stop it." Like not really looking at the owner, but like, "Sorry." But like this like weird, awkward, like very city, like I don't want to be your friend. And then in what we've noticed here is like, these community like this, like there'll be a tent set up and chairs around. There'll be a tent set up and chairs around and people engaging with each other and like letting the dogs hang out. It's almost like, we're at like a barbecue and we've brought our kids and like they're fine.
Yeah.
It's also usually bigger dogs, which makes sense. There's more space out here. But it's an interesting, I don't know what sparks that.
Yeah. So perhaps that's the future of the pigeon people, as we're calling them.
Yeah, dog park.
But as it stands, just a whole lot of bullshitting in a circle.
Yeah.
In the middle of a parking lot. One of the hallmarks of Staten Island.
Yes.
And with that will conclude our Staten Island time.
Yeah, I think that's all we have to talk about right now.
Yeah, so pleased to have been able to be out here.
Mm-hmm.
If it weren't for this project, we never would have experienced anything like this.
Yeah.
And it's been great. We didn't even really address where we're sitting right now. But if you want to learn more about where we are, you should just go back and listen to last week's episode.
Yeah,
'Cause-
it'll tell you all about where we stayed in this really awesome intentional community on Staten Island. And yeah, you can go back to last week and hear all about that.
Yeah. But thanks so much for watching and or listening. If you like this, please like it in a virtual way and send it along to people, subscribe. We do this every Tuesday. We also have the 360 videos that we release every Saturday of our walk. We have pictures a lot up on Instagram. You should check those out. It includes some pictures of the different political signs this past week that we saw, which are crazy and definitely worth checking out if you haven't seen them. And as we mentioned at the top of the show, we're going to have the clothing up soon. So we just keep on creating different stuff for you all, and we hope you like it. And if you do, please let us know, because it helps us keep doing this.
Yeah.
So thanks so much for watching. Until next time, take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.